All right, everybody, I'd like to introduce our next presentation here at the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vancouver. Presenting right now is Greg Reed from Kraken Robotics. Greg, take it away.
Thank you, Bobby. Everyone can hear me okay? All right, Kraken Robotics. We are a unmanned systems player. We focus on the ocean technology space, and our end markets are predominantly defense market by and large, and as well a little bit in the energy markets, both offshore wind and offshore oil and gas. What you can see on the front page here is one of our products called the Catfish. That is used predominantly for mine hunting for the defense market, so looking for underwater explosives. And that system, the fish itself, as well as the launch and recovery equipment and the winch associated with it and all the topside computers that go on a vessel, sells for about $5 million per system. So Kraken itself, we happy to say that this week we turned 11 years old. And if you look at our company, really the first 6 or 7 years of the company was technology development and initial sales and demos of the systems. So not much in the way of revenues, but really the last 3-4 years and this year and what we expect next year, we're starting to see some really good momentum. We'll show the financials here in a few slides, but we've grown from 12 million in 2020 to 26 million in 2021 in revenue. 2022 was 41 million. And then for this year, our guidance is for the midpoint of the guidance is in the low 70s million. So we're starting to see some good acceleration on the top line. And also we're starting to see some good acceleration on the EBITDA side, and we should be net income positive this year as well. Okay, slide number 2. We are dual use technology. So for what that means to people that don't know what that means, our technology originated for the defense market, and we also sell it into the commercial market. We work in the ocean space, as I mentioned. 71% of the Earth's surface is the oceans. Probably 80% of the oceans have not been explored at all. And of the 20% of the oceans that have been explored and mapped, a lot of it is in very low resolution. We lead with innovation. So really our company, our 11-year history, we've been focused on high-end imaging sonar, as well as subsea battery technology, which we use in both our own equipment and as well as other people's subsea robots. One thing to mention about the domain that we play in, the ocean space, it's a very challenging domain. It's easier to put equipment into outer space than it is into deep into the ocean. Issues are things like corrosion. There's no GPS. Communication bandwidth is very limited, and you've got intense pressures. From another key point about the company is we look at the history of the company. While we're a Canadian company with offices in Europe as well as in South America, the employee base really comes from a lot of well-known companies throughout the industry and other defense companies. So everybody from Boeing, who a lot of people don't realize have a large underwater division, to various employees from various navies around the world and other large defense contractors. Okay, I mentioned at the very first slide that we play in the unmanned systems space. So everybody is very familiar with the events in Afghanistan, what's happening in Ukraine today. Everybody's familiar with aerial drones or aerial unmanned systems. Not a lot of people are familiar with underwater unmanned vehicles or unmanned systems. So what you see on the page here on slide 3 is some examples of some of our customers. Ranging from Lockheed Martin to Anduril, which is a large defense contractor in the U.S. or an emerging defense contractor in the U.S. On the bottom, you see the Remus vehicle there. That's the brand for Huntington Ingalls unmanned vehicles, and Huntington Ingalls is the U.S. Navy's largest shipbuilder. On the right-hand side, you see a boat with our Catfish product on the back of it. The boat is the largest Israeli defense contractor called Elbit Systems, and that's our Catfish on the back of it. That can be remotely operated or it can be fully unmanned with our equipment on the back, providing very high-end sonar imagery. So to other customers, we provide the sonar and the batteries that go in those unmanned vehicles. So another important characteristic of the industry is these vehicles come in a variety of sizes. And there's a new platform that's starting to emerge called extra large unmanned underwater vehicles, or XL-UUVs. You can see in the middle there, that's from Anduril. That XL-UUV is about the size of a school bus. So on the smaller vehicles, we will typically sell a $500,000 sonar and maybe $1 million or $1.5 million worth of batteries. When you start talking about school bus size underwater vehicles, we're selling anywhere from $6, $7, $8, $10 million worth of batteries per vehicle. So as that class of vehicle starts to emerge in the market, it's favorable to our outlook. Okay, two markets that we mainly focus on, the defense market and the commercial market, which I'll talk about in a second. On the defense side, the area that we really play in is mine countermeasures or mine warfare. And this is an area of the Navy that has been underfunded for many, many years. And it's really making its comeback now, driven by geopolitics, driven by what's happened with the Russia-Ukraine war. The South China Sea is a very hot topic in Asia Pacific, Taiwan, and concern about the Chinese and ownership of, or what they might eventually do with Taiwan in the future. The Persian Gulf has been talked about for a number of years, and then the Arctic as well. Russia, China, a number of other countries that have property or have land joining the Arctic. It's a high-profile area, and there's competition among countries for resources, competition amongst navies as well. So within that backdrop, you look at a subsea mine, and a subsea mine could cost, $20,000. It's an asymmetric threat. A subsea mine could block a major shipping lane, disrupt trade, block sea lanes, disrupt commerce. A subsea mine could be planted and could blow up a pipeline, could blow up a billion-dollar warship. And for the general public, they only really became aware of that when the Baltic pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline, blew up a couple of years ago, likely sabotaged or definitely sabotaged. So within this industry, you've got the mine hunting equipment that has been in the industry is old, it's obsolete, there's an upgrade cycle that's happening, and not only are the manned mine hunting vessels starting to be upgraded, but they're getting replaced with unmanned systems as well. So what you see on that page where it says MS, the picture at the bottom there, that is the Danish Navy. They have 4 of those drone boats, and that's 4 of our, or you see 2 of the systems that are deployed that we've sold to them in the last couple of years. And as I talk about the pipeline in some future slides, there's a number of other countries that are going through this exact same upgrade cycle, driven by these geopolitical events. So against this backdrop, we are selling our high-end sonar, and we are selling our batteries for vehicles that operate on the batteries. Switching gears to the offshore energy market. Offshore energy is really offshore wind and offshore oil and gas. Most of our revenue in this area comes from offshore wind. There's a lot of subsea infrastructure out there, oil and gas platforms, 200,000 plus kilometers of subsea pipelines. Thousands of offshore wind turbines exist today, and multiple thousands are going to be built over the next 20 years. And there's 1 million plus kilometers of fiber optic cable. This is equipment that needs to be inspected, and you need high-end sonar equipment to both image what's on the seafloor today, but also when you're building out things like offshore wind farms and you're planning a wind farm park, you're driving monopiles into the ground and you're connecting them all together with subsea cables. You need to know what's in the ocean floor before you actually, start the construction phase. So our technology, the catfish that I showed a picture of, allows you to see objects on the seafloor in very high resolution at range. but we also have technology that allows you to image into the seafloor, so you can see if a buried power cable is is properly positioned. Okay, switching to what's Kraken's business model. I mentioned earlier that we were started in 2012. Today, our revenue mix is about 80% defense industry and 20% commercial, i.e. offshore wind and offshore oil and gas. And if you look at the breakdown, the defense business is predominantly a product sale business. Contracts typically range from historically, they were $500,000 to $1 million contracts. We've won some $30 and $50 million contracts in the last couple of years. And a good part of our pipeline that we see today is more of these $30, $40, $50 million contracts, which are coming down the pipe in the industry. That's the defense side. On the commercial side, typically it's a service business as opposed to a product sale. And contracts are smaller. They're typically $500,000 to $1 million to $3 million contracts. You'll get the contract in May, and you'll have to be out there providing the service in June. So it's a different business, uses some similar technologies. There's a lot of cross-pollination between our products and our service business. And the service business is focused on offshore wind. I've got some pricing down there as well. Just some points that I mentioned previously as to various product sales. Okay, probably one of the slides we're proudest about besides the employee slide is who our customer base is. So as I mentioned, we're starting to gain some good momentum in the defense side of the business. You can see a number of contracts there over the last year and a half, about $50 million of programs like the Canadian Navy. On the Catfish product, about $25 million of wins in the last year plus. And on the battery side, in the last year, we've won over $40 million worth of battery business. Just looking at some of the names on the page there, Elbit Systems, the largest Israeli defense contractor, Huntington Ingalls, the U.S. Navy's largest shipbuilder, Saab. A lot of people don't know that Saab is a large defense contractor as well. Everybody remembers them as being the car company. Remontola, the Polish Navy, the Australian Navy, the British Navy. So these are customers that have taken a long time to develop, and we've finally got our foot in the door with a number of them. And it all started 11 years ago when we sold or we introduced to the Australian and the U.S. Navy research labs. That's how we first got our foot in the door. On the commercial side of the business, it's the well-known names in the sector. Ørsted is the world's largest offshore wind developer. EDF, Equinor, large European energy companies. Looking at our financials, I mentioned the history there. This year, we've given guidance. We recently reported Q2 results. We reaffirmed our guidance for 2023. The calendar year ends between 66 and 78 million in revenues. So the midpoint there is 72 million. That's up from 41 million last year. That's well north of 50% growth. EBITDA margins last quarter we were in the low 20s, I believe. For the year, we expect will be around 20% EBITDA margins and long-term financial targets. While we haven't given long-term guidance, specific numbers, as we look 4 to 5 years out, we think we can continue to grow the top line at 40% plus CAGR, based on what we're seeing with our product portfolio and what we're seeing with our end market customers, and maintain margins in the 20% plus range. Do you have a time check? Okay, so that's a very high level of look at the company, and I'll come back to the pipeline at the end here. We'll get into, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the technology. I'm not going to dive deep on this, and then you guys can ask some questions at the end. From the product portfolio, just showing you the SAS is synthetic aperture sonar is where our company started. Very high-end sonar technology used in the mine hunting industry. And typically, our sonar will either come integrated with on an AUV from another manufacturer, or else we will retrofit AUVs or UUVs that have been sold in the market with an upgrade to our sonar. You can see some pictures of our batteries there. Our Catfish. Important to recognize on our Catfish that we're not just selling an underwater drone. We're selling the long-term recovery equipment, the winch, the topside computer that does the very fast processing. That catfish does not get dragged behind a boat underwater. It actually flies underwater. You can see the four control planes on the back of the on the back of the catfish there. So they are actively controlled. So if the platform is starting to wobble underwater and it's not stable, that the winch will either pay out or pull in cable so that you're flying steady underwater because in order to generate the very high-end synthetic aperture sonar images, you need a flat platform or a stable platform flying underwater. So it's some of the similar hydrodynamics versus aerodynamics for an airplane. Some of those same things come into play underwater, and there's a lot of development and technology in those systems. On the right-hand side, we show our sub-bottom imager and our acoustic core technology. So this is the technology that is used to image into the seabed, used predominantly for the offshore wind and offshore oil and gas market. And that equipment will get attached. You can see an example of the sub-bottom imager. It's on a sled or a skid that gets attached to the bottom of a remotely operated vehicle. Or on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of the acoustic core. This is actually laid on the ocean floor. It's got a beam across it that's about 12 meters wide, and then that will image down to 30, 40, 50 meters into the seabed. Okay, speed up a little bit here, but on synthetic aperture sonar, our core expertise, that we're one of a few companies in the world that have synthetic aperture sonar. Probably our most notable competitor that would have a very strong product offering would be Northrop Grumman out of the US, but then we've beaten them on a number of bids, which I'll talk about in a bit here. We've integrated on 20 different AUV, ROV platforms. So the way to think of that is we put our sonar, it's equivalent to putting your LiDAR sensors into a whole bunch of electric vehicle, a bunch of different vehicle brands. So we are agnostic. We will sell to the various players in the industry. Ultra high resolution imaging. So what's unique about our technology is that we will give the very high resolution images at range. So what that means for an offshore oil and gas or an offshore wind customer is that when you're trying to go out and map your wind farm area, the vessels that are used to do that typically cost $100,000, $200,000 a day. So you want to go out there and get the job done quicker, which reduces costs. And also means less emissions for the offshore vessels. On the military side, it's really about going into the contested areas, finding underwater mines, getting in, getting out, keeping the sailors out of harm's way. And because you have this real-time capability, very strong imaging, you get reduced uncertainty to the customers, or you provide reduced uncertainty. So that's our sonar that I just mentioned, the SAS. Now the SAS, we've integrated that onto a complete platform called Catfish, which we sold the first unit in 2018. We've since sold to 6 countries now. Most recently, we announced a $9 million sale in the last 3-4 months to a large country in Asia Pacific, and you can see their name on the slide there. From the competitive point of view, there's just a handful of companies we compete with our Catfish product. And in terms of the pipeline for the Catfish product, you can see a number of the demos that we've done recently with Australia, the UK, Thailand, the US, the Task Force 59, which is a US task force, unmanned system task force based out of Bahrain. And in terms of upcoming programs, which are sizable, I mentioned earlier, the $30, $40, $50 million type programs in the pipeline. Here's examples of countries that are in the RFQ stage or close to contract award stage, or going to RFQ within the next 12 months that would all be 5+ Catfish unit opportunities. So Australia, Singapore, Italy, India, Taiwan, and a whole bunch of NATO countries. Subsea batteries, spend a second on this. Subsea batteries, our differentiator is not cell chemistry, so we buy lithium-ion cells from a third party. Our real differentiator, and you can see examples of where we're integrated onto a number of customers. Our real differentiator is on slide 13, actually slide 14, and that's using pressure tolerant encapsulation as opposed to, as opposed to pressure housing. And what that means is we are taking lithium ion cells or lithium polymer cells, as I mentioned. We're packaging them together in cell blocks. We're putting a bunch of cell blocks together with a battery management system, and then we're encapsulating the whole unit in what looks like a silicone polymer. And as a result, we can put more energy density into a vehicle versus the traditional way of doing it was putting these cylindrical batteries that you see here at the top that are inside a titanium pressure vessel with an oil compensation system. So we get more energy density into the vehicle. And what that means is, going back to our customers, one of the customers on this page said that their vehicles, when they put them in the water, they can get almost 100 hours of endurance with our batteries in their system. And our batteries replaced the ones that came with the vehicle, and they were getting 55 hours or so. So that's the value proposition to the customer. Key driver of underwater batteries is the XL UUV market that I talked about. And here's an example of some of the players that are just emerging in the last year to 3 years in the XL UUV space. So a number of different countries around the world with a number of larger players. Okay, so sales pipeline, wrapping this all up on the sales pipeline. If we looked at all the catfish opportunities and as well as all the SaaS opportunities on unmanned vehicles, that's a $300 million plus pipeline. Batteries, really driven by XL UUV. So if we were standing here a year and a half ago, our battery opportunity, we probably would have showed $50 million. So there's a much larger opportunity now. And then on the services side of the business, that's really driven by offshore wind, and that is a lot of different opportunities adding up to that number. From a cap structure point of view, so we are a public company. Might not have mentioned it at the beginning, but roughly 100 million Canadian market cap. You can see the target prices from the various analysts that do cover us. We recently reported financial results, and there had been, we did have a warrant overhang. The warrants expired at the end of July. We also had some vendor debt that we had to pay off post the quarter, and we paid that off with cash. That was a result of an acquisition that we did 2 years ago that gave us the sub-bottom imaging technology. So we paid that off. We've recently increased our line of credit as we start to get involved in some bigger programs, and it's always good to have that line of credit available. So our balance sheet is much better than it has been historically. The warrant overhang is gone. If you look at, I'm not up here to talk about valuation. I obviously think we're very undervalued, but you can go look at some of the peers, and they're trading 15, 16 times forward EBITDA. Versus we're less than half of that. And to wrap it up, in summary, we're a technology company in a unique space. The underwater domain, barriers to entry are really high, and as a result, margins are pretty good. Contracts, we're seeing a big increase in activity that I've talked about, and just look at our customer base. As Australia, Denmark, Poland, Israel, as these countries have taken delivery of our system over the last 3 years, and they start to become really good reference customers for us, that position us very well to win some of these other businesses. And the team, overall 235, 240 employees, heavy science, engineering, software focus from the team. From the board of directors, just point out we have Mike Connor, Vice Admiral, former, he used to run the U.S. Submarine Force. He's a 35-year Navy veteran, 3-star Admiral. Bernard Mills used to work at one of our competitors, was a C-level executive at some major defense contractors, and so he joined us in December of last year. And I think people should be on the watch for some other additions that we'll make to the board in the not-too-distant future, which will be very good additions. And that is it. Open it up to questions. The final 3 slides people can look at themselves are just some customer snapshots of our Danish and Polish Navy, Anduril, Huntington Ingalls, you can see what we're doing with various customers. Thank you. Yes. Yep. So the question was, the gentleman listed off 3 companies and said that they were in deep sea mining, and he was asking, he said he noticed most of our customers were defense focused. I'm just trying to find a slide here. So on this slide right here, you can see the yellow vehicle at the top. So I'm on page 3. That is a company called Teledyne, very well-known large company in a number of different spaces. We've sold batteries and sonar to Teledyne on their large vehicles and their smaller vehicles. And they publicly have released that one of their customers, a Norwegian company, is using 2 of their vehicles for subsea mining exploration. So yeah, so as subsea mining, if it gets past the environmentalists and it takes off eventually, there's the exploration phase. Well, people are looking for what's laying on the seafloor. So for those that aren't familiar, these polymetallic nodules, which are high in manganese, cobalt, and a few other battery metals. There's lots of them on the ocean floor, and there's a number of companies that have been out looking for them. So again, if there's a gold rush, we're not a gold miner. We're providing the picks and shovels to the people that are out there doing that. So yeah, we do have some customers indirectly as we sell our equipment to UUVs, which are used for subsea mining. Yeah. Okay, one more. Sounds like that's a wrap. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.